Kia ora whānau, guess who's back? It's me. I'm using this brand new Sculpey Souffle Poppy Seed, making a base. The base is actually going to be a little bit over, is it 3 mil? No, it's a 3 mil base. Is it? I can't remember. Look how beautiful and smooth it is. Now, as you know, I like to trim off the edges just to make sure that I don't end up going over any folds. Now, these beautiful colours are literally scrap clay. So what I do in my studio, this is the rip and tear technique, by the way, very easy, as you can see. So these colours have all been mixed together with scrap clay sitting in my drawers. What I do is I categorize all the clay into colours. I cut off any big chunks of black or any dark colours, make sure that all the pinks are together, all the purples are together, all the yellows are together, that sort of thing. And then I just mix them up. Now, I did do that in our creative community, the Makers Narrative, just during a live session, and it was heaps of fun. But I highly recommend, if you have got lots of bright colours that you can put together, as in not just a whole lot of like, I don't know, skeletons. Sounds like Halloween, okay. But what I mean is, generally it's best if you can just put together, categorize your colors and make sure that you don't end up with really muddy mixes. So you can see these are all quite bright colors. Now I'm just going through, softening the clay, ripping little pieces off and tearing them. Rip and tear, and placing them on the slab. Now, I do tend to do a little bit of a pattern where you can kind of see how I will put each colour near the last colour. That's really helpful, makes it look cute. Now we're going to roll down using our guides, I think. Are we? Is that what we're doing? Oh, I'm going to wipe this down. Always good to wipe your surface, make it nice and clean. Okay. By the way, just so you know, my cute nails don't look cute soon. Now we're using our medium depth guides, which are 3 mil, rolling down, and I decide that I want a little bit more of a pop going on with this. So I decide, in a minute, like coming up, I decide that I want to do a metallic colour. Now, I just want to show this colour recipe to you. That is 18 karat gold and gold. Mix them together and you get the most lush gold. Like, it just is so beautiful. You know how 18 karat gold is a little bit too light and then gold is a little bit too bold, like just a bit too much in your face? Mix those two together in a 1-to-1 ratio. Heaven, I promise. I did a little clicking thing then and my voiceovers are just getting worse. Guys, if you're in here and you're subscribed, if you have subscribed, that just means the world to me. Now, look at that. Look how beautiful that is. Rip and tear, so easy. But we're going to take it to the next level tonight. So tonight, I say tonight because it's midnight and I'm doing this. Now, I'm just using a variety of shape cutters. You guys know, if you've watched my other videos, I love all sorts of different brands. These ones here are from Outline, who are based in Singapore. Those are from Blackbird and Violet. Those are from Claytime Tools. Those ones are from, still Claytime Tools. And also, I think I'm using some Arc and Curve as well. And the reason why I like these cutters and choose these cutters is because they're ultra sharp. That's what it comes down to. Plus, usually they've got beautiful shapes. So, Okay, so we have cut all our shapes out. One of the things that I actually really like to do is make sure that I make the most of every slab and I don't waste it. Then I'm going to use my blade and, we're onto a whole nother slab now. Wow! Okay, I really decided that I wanted to have a complimentary slab, but just keep in mind, you don't see this one afterwards, I don't think, because I go into a whole nother thing. So all I'm doing is literally cutting up tiny pieces of gold and putting it on the black. And this does take me about an hour to do. I know. It does look cute, and we roll it out and all of that sort of thing, but I don't think I use it later on. I don't think I use the components, if I'm honest with you. It was very aesthetically pleasing. Look at that. Yes, I like that. Now, I actually really like an old school, like slice and dice, put the dot on like that, like rather than just using posca pens and stuff. I do like one of those sort of classic slabs. No, there's a big air bubble in the middle of that one. Why are we doing this so slow? Why do I always smooth the clay like that? Guys, are you starting to question that stuff now? Because I am. Now I watch so many of these videos and then I voice over afterwards. I'm like, why am I doing... Look, I'm violating the slab. Stop it. And I just cut out a few cute shapes to go with that slab that I just made. But honestly, with what I do with it later, I don't really use these, but I'll still use them, if that makes sense. And I did also cut out a few gold and a few of the other colors. This is kind of what I ended up with, but I'm about to go through now and finish them, which is something that people always ask me about, so I kind of want to share a little snippet of what I do. So these are all cured and have just come out of the oven. I cure on a ceramic tile, and yes, I end up with a shiny back, but it's also super flat. So we take them all off the tiles. You'll see what happens. We're going to use a little bit of acetone, just like this, with a cotton pad, some nitrile gloves. I'm wearing nitrile gloves, but honestly, they don't really do anything. It still ruins my nail polish. You're going to see it in a minute. It's quite funny, actually. Because in a past video, I have said, I like wear the gloves so that it saves my nail polish. Well, I learned my lesson today, didn't I? Because I had to have like a makeover during this bloody video. So I do all of this. And then, that takes ages, by the way. I had to like speed that up ridiculously. Now look at this. It's a tragedy. Wow, that's hot. So let's change them. Yes, and if you're wondering, these videos can actually take me up to 1 to 2 days, sometimes 2 or 3 days, because of things like this. When you have to take 2 hours to do your nails again, clean them. Anyway, total nightmare. We're about to do some sanding. So all we have to do to sand, we've obviously done all the backs with acetone. We're going to use our Dremel, this is a Dremel stylo, sorry, and with a little buffing tip, and we're just going to go through. Now, it is ideal if you wear eyewear, you need to wear safety glasses and wear a mask, because obviously dust from polymer clay is microparticles of plastic. So don't breathe it in, and make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. Don't do what I'm doing right now. I'm actually doing this at my desk, which means the dust goes on everything. Well, fucking living my best life, okay? So that's all we need to do. Clean up the edges. See how beautiful the backs are after you've done the liquid sanding? So good. So we're just going through. Now, usually I have my Dremel on the highest power. It does sound like it's going to blow up, but it's fine. It's fine. I've got a backup, So we go through and we do all the edges. Now, I do want to show you a couple of more fiddly pieces to show you what I would normally do with a fiddly piece. And we're just going to do this one first. Hang on. Here we go. So with this one here, I'll still go over the edges that I can get to with the Dremel. Then I will usually get a cotton pad with a little bit of acetone on it. And I'm going to show you what I do with it. Is I'll fold it and just do those little inner edges with acetone. So, and then the inside, using a sharp blade, we just go over it like that, just to get away any sort of bumpy edges. And that's how I do that sort of shape. If it's a more intricate one like this one, I do actually use my Dremel to just go up on the side. See how I'm just angling it different to what I would normally do. And then I will use a combination of liquid sanding with acetone and also using my drill bit, I know, stop it, to get rid of any big sort of edges. And I'm going to show you on this one. See those bits that are hanging? Yeah, yep. Like I said, wear your safety glasses, hold on to your components really well. This takes a lot of practice. Please do it. If you want to try this, practice on your scrap components first before you go in with your good ones. And then I also use a combination of blade, Like I said, liquid sanding. You can also use wet and dry sandpaper, whatever works for you, but just be gentle. Don't go and try and get into those bits with a buffing tip on. It's just not going to work. And there are actually a whole lot of different shapes of buffing tips that you can get for Dremels as well. Anyway, this is going to jump forward straight after this. I sanded all those, but now we're going to go into making them fancy AF. So I want to show you what I do. It's such a simple little technique to make them pop. We're also going to resin coat them, and I'm going to try and fit that into this video, hopefully. Well, I will have by the time you see this. Anyway, let's move on before this becomes a shit show. So all we're going to use is some, okay, here's the round ones as well. Cute. So obviously that's your rip and tear components, and I'm going to show you how to make them pop. So we're going to use Posca pens, some of my favorite. Posca pen is an acrylic paint pen. These are the different sizes I use. I don't think I'll tag them or link them below if I can. This is like my favorite one. There's a couple that I don't use. And also these Pen Touch metallic gold pens are an oil-based paint pen. They do take a long time to dry. So as you can see there, I'm using this small, I think it's a PC1MR. Oh, you guys will have seen it just a second ago. Oh, didn't I get rid of this bit? Oh, shit. So, okay. All right. Oh, no. Wow, such a professional setup here. Just FYI, it's me, my phone, and a really, really shonky Amazon stand. Oh, you're getting sneak peeks at all the other stuff I did. Oh, okay, we can't have that. I might have to delete this. Why is it taking me half an hour to do this? Okay. So we're going to use the small, see the nib on this Posca pen? That's the kind of one you want. The other one that you can get flicks it out, flicks the paint everywhere, and it turns into a total nightmare. So all I'm doing is doing kind of like a little, like box pattern or what's outline, but it's kind of like inlining because it's inside the color of the rip and tear. You can see exactly what I'm doing, so I don't need to make some weird description, which is what I'm currently doing, and it's feeling very awkward right now. Very, very awkward. I'm going to call this inlining or drawing a pattern inside the rip tear. Oh, fuck. Oh, God. Okay, bleep that out. Just forget I said that. Just do what I'm doing here. The key is with Posca pen is to let it dry before you do anything else on top of it. Now, also, there's two options for you on sealing this. The first option is to let the Posca pen dry and then the oil-based gold pen dry, and you can use a varnish spray over top of it, but I would highly recommend you do not use a liquid varnish that you paint on unless... No, you can't. You just can't, because you would have to cure again the black Posca pen in the oven for like 20 minutes before you can then you have to put the gold on. No, so you just can't do that. You have to use a spray varnish, or like what I'm going to do is you're going to use epoxy resin. You can choose to use UV resin if you like. I'm just personally not a fan of UV resin. Mainly for the fact that it yellows so quickly, and I don't know, I just don't like it. It's fiddly and sticky, and I don't like using those blue lights. Whatever, it's each to their own. If you want to do UV resin, do UV resin. I personally prefer to do epoxy resin. My favorite doming resin in epoxy resin is Epoxy Cast by Barnes, which is an Australian brand. Or if you're in America, Art Resin is amazing. I'll tag both of those resins below. I'm going to be using Epoxy Cast in this one. And the reason why I love that so much is because I can do two things with it. I can cast with it, so I can cast earring components, but I can also dome with it as well. Wow. We're moving this camera again. Yes, got this. She's got this. Stop it. Here we go. Oh, yeah, bit shaky, but we got it. So yeah, just in general resin chats, epoxy resin is ideal for these. I'm also going to show you how to do brush latex on the back to just save yourself so much time. So as you can see, we're still going here. I did this so that I could talk to you about the resin, basically. I made this slower. I could have sped it up, but I didn't. What was I going to say? What was I saying? Guys, what was I saying? I think we're moving on to the gold now. With these gold pens, they're super affordable. You can just get them from Officeworks. It's called a Pen Touch, and it's an oil-based gold pen. Now, all I want to do is draw a little bit of gold in the middle of that to kind of make it pop, and it looks so good. So you can see how easy it is, how beautiful and metallic it is. Now, let me just warn you, if you decide to cure this in the oven for some reason after you've used the gold pen, it's going to go dull. If you don't seal it, it's going to rub off and it'll get sticky. So like I'm saying now, epoxy resin or a spray varnish is the best option. You cannot leave it without varnishing it. Okay? And if you do, well, that's your problem. It's just going to come off and it's going to get rub off. So this is what I do to make my rip and tears look a little bit fancier. It's a combination of the Posca pen and the gold pen. Now you can also use, there's other gold pens you can use. Posca obviously has gold, but they just don't have that metallic finish the same way. There's also another brand called Krylon, Krylon, who also do a gold pen. I haven't tried it yet, but I really want to, because I think they're actually very expensive because it's actual gold leaf in the pen, whereas this is just gold mica powders or whatever they use. Look at this. It's a little bit fancy. Yep, love it. Okay, good. So what was I saying about brush latex? Right, brush latex is basically a product that you use to protect things. So they use it for special effects, to make people look like they've got scars on their faces and all of that sort of thing, or wounds. But it's also used in jewelry making, and what I do, to protect the back of your component when you resin coat. So what that does is if you overspill with resin, it means that the resin can't stick to the back of your component. I know that this is polymer clay and people will say you don't need to do it. Here it is, brush latex. I get mine from Barnes, which is an Australian brand, but you can buy it pretty much anywhere. I put a little bit into a pot and just use a brush, and this is exactly how I do it. So I brush a thin layer on the back, let it dry, and then obviously turn your component over, do your resin over the top. If it spills over the edge, it's going to only go onto the brush latex, which then means you can peel it off. Now, I don't care whether I'm quite experienced with resin now. I still put brush latex on every single one of my components that I'm going to use epoxy resin on, purely because I cannot be bothered scraping, sanding, or anything like that. I just think it's good part of my work process, and so I do it. Okay, it's so cute, look at that. And it just peels off. So it takes all of this is real time. I haven't sped this up, so this is exactly how long it takes. I'm probably being a little bit more conscious of the fact that I'm filming this, but that's the amount of time it takes, and it only takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes to just dry, and then it will just be like a tacky sort of feeling on the back, which you can just peel off. It is an absolute lifesaver and time saver. If you don't do it, you need to do it, and you'll never go back. The main reason is if you are actually putting a resin coating onto, say, resin, like cured resin, like cast resin, you will never get resin off resin unless you do this exact thing where you can just then peel it off. With polymer clay, it's actually really easy to get resin off the back, but just in case you haven't cured it properly, it can still rip the back off your components. So I think what I'm trying to say amongst all this babbling that I'm doing is just do brush latex if you decide you're going to resin coat anything. Because you know what? Even the most simplest shapes, like a small stud or a round like component, can still overspill and the shit can still hit the fan, if you know what I mean. So brush latex, leave it for an hour or so, turn them over, set them up and get ready to go. Now we're about to do some doming to make that gold pop. And I've got them all ready. These are all brushed latex laid out on silicone mats with a tray underneath so I can easily move them. I'm in a well-ventilated room. I'm about to use nitrile gloves right here, which are the ones that you need to use for epoxy resin. They stop the resin from seeping through your gloves and onto your skin. And the key thing with resin is making sure that you keep it away from your skin, your eyes, etc. It doesn't really have any fumes that hurt you. It's more about the resin being in contact with your skin. It can actually cause you to have a really terrible allergy, so just be really careful. Now today I'm going to be using epoxy cast. Who says it like that? Barnes Epoxy Cast, which is my favorite resin because I can use it for two things, casting and doming. Barnes also have one called epoxy glass for doming, but I still actually just prefer to have epoxy cast. It is a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning that I will use 2 parts of part A and 1, oh my gosh, get this right, Sheree. 2 parts of part A and 1 part of part B. I like to do mine by weight, but I highly recommend that whatever resin you're using, you follow the instructions. I have just tried this out a few times and never had an issue. Whereas some brands of resin, you can't weigh them out. Like Health of Mind Art really needs to be done by volume because of the difference in the weight of the liquids. So yes, and whenever you have scales that say they measure liquids, they don't. Okay, so do not rely on scales to measure liquid volume. Use a measuring cup, a reliable one. I highly recommend the ones that you can get from Barnes. They're really great. So the Barnes measuring cups are really accurate, if that's helpful. So once you've got your 2 parts in there, I like to wrap my hands around the cup to kind of warm up the resin a little bit and then slowly mix using a reusable stick. These pink reusable sticks you can get from Blackbird and Violet. They're fantastic. You can also use wooden sticks. You can use the Bob and Frank reusable sticks. You can use whatever you like. I like these because they're nice and wide and they're just easy to hold. And then of course you just wipe them with a wipe afterwards and you can use them again. With resin, epoxy resin, what can happen is if the room is too cold, your resin consistency will be quite thick and gluggy and you can end up with more air bubbles. So if you want to, or if you're in a cold room, I would suggest that you warm the room up with a heater or what have you, or, you know, your ducted heating, cooling, blah, blah, blah. Or use the heat of your hand, or you can also use a warm bowl of water to sit the cup in just to help warm it up a little bit. That will help the viscosity get a little bit looser, a little bit thinner, so that then it can release more air bubbles instead of trapping them. And it will be a little bit harder to dome with if the consistency is too thin. So there's a fine line, and this is why a lot of the time people struggle using epoxy cast for doming, is because of the viscosity being that little bit thinner. But the reason it's like that is because it's a casting resin and it needs to get into every little nook and cranny and be able to release air bubbles easier. So you will find when you use a doming resin or one that's specifically made for doming that the consistency will always be a lot thicker, and that's what helps you keep it, get it onto your components a lot easier, and it will hold a little bit easier. There is always the tendency with epoxy cast for it to overspill a little bit more than the average, but once you get used to it and the timelines and how it works, it's easy as. Now, I also like to use a pipette, which is the little plastic tubes that you can see, to apply my resin doming. So what I usually do is I will trim these little ends off. these ones here. They're just a little bit too long for me. Now, lots of people prefer not to use a pipette because they aren't actually a reusable item. They're a disposable item. However, the way I think about it is that they are used all the time. Same with syringes in medical professions. So, like for me, it's just one of those things. But if you don't like using that, you can quite easily use a popsicle stick or however you like to get it on to your component. However, you will have a lot more control. Oh, wow, that was... Wow, such professional content. You will find a pipette is much easier to apply with. So you squeeze it, pop it in, and then it sucks up the resin. I like to use two so that I can quickly work instead of having to sit and wait for the next one to fill up. Those pieces are so gorgeous, and they're just going to pop under the resin. So grabbing one of them, what you do is you squeeze it before you take it out. And then as you need to release the resin, you let it go slowly. Okay, so it's a squeeze to put it into the resin, let it suck it up. When you're ready to take it out, you squeeze it again, which helps hold the resin inside the pipette until you're ready to release it. Now, it takes practice, so don't get stressed about it. You're going to apply, so when I do a ring like this, I like to apply just like a thin circle around the actual component, and what happens is the resin will slightly spread out. If you apply too much, you're going to get overspill. If you don't apply enough, you're going to get patches that don't have resin on as well. So you've just got to find that sweet spot with getting the resin on there. Now, I do find with these really difficult shapes, sometimes I'm going to have to do a whole video just on doming these shapes. I think I'm going to do a more in-depth one because talking through it can be quite hard. What I do find it easier to do is to sort of fill the middle bits and then spread to the edges, because any components that are like really curvy like this or like flower components, what will happen is the resin is kind of like a little bit of a magnet to itself. So it is attracted and it's drawn to itself. So if it's on a curve where it's close together, or it's in a flower, like on a petal or something like that, if it's close, it's going to pull together, and that's how you end up with overspill, where it's sort of pulling towards itself and then it will overspill. Now, another thing that can happen is if your surface that you're actually resin coating is super smooth, like it's cernit or you've just sanded the surface, or it's actually resin that you're doming, you can find that it will pull back a lot. So what I find the best is to go around and do every single piece, but then when you get to the end, go back around to the beginning where you started and do exactly what I'm doing here, using just like a little needle tool or something like that to pull to the edges and add any more resin where you need to add it. Then you're going to leave it for a minimum of 48 to 72 hours to cure. Now, that is based on the fact that your room is kind of like a nice warmish temperature. If it's cold or it's winter or anything like that, it's probably going to take twice as long to cure. So just be patient. Don't rush. Don't use a fast setting resin for doming. Just use the actual product that you need to use for doming so that you get a beautiful finish. Don't rush it. And like, I'm not a big fan of UV resin, so this is my preference, because the reason I like epoxy resin more than UV resin is because it doesn't yellow as fast. It's much stronger, it's a lot less toxic, and it's actually easier to apply. Yes, it's not as fast. No, it doesn't take 2 minutes. It does take 2 days, but it's worth the wait. The finish of it is just so much more professional and high quality. So after it's cured, you can take off the backs. You don't need to do anything. When I say take off the backs, I mean remove what I'm doing here, removing the brush latex. You're also going to remove any overspill that you have, which I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in a couple of minutes, in a second. And then you're just going to put them aside after you've done this for another 24 hours minimum before you start drilling holes in them. Because if you drill too soon and without a sharp drill bit, it will actually lift away from the components. So just be really careful of that happening. But they should look shiny and beautiful like this. You shouldn't have to do anything. You don't have to polish it. You don't have to put anything on it. It should look gorgeous. But yeah, so just be careful of, I do recommend that when you're drilling through resin coated things that you get a fresh drill bit so that it's ultra sharp. A lot of the time, here's overspill. This is what it can look like. See the shape of the silicone mat? That is overspill, and you can see it's really only on ones that have very complex shapes. So these ones always overspill for me, so I'm always prepared. It can sometimes be good to put a tiny bit in the center as well and in the little crevices. So a pair of pliers, squeeze it around, and then just gently pull it off the surface. Now, because the resin has overspilled and gone onto the brushed latex, there is a protective layer between the component and the resin, and here we are, we're just peeling it back. Now, if you did not have the brushed latex in between the two components, or like in between the two layers, it would just be really difficult and messy to pull off. So just do yourself a favor, save yourself some time, and then end up with a beautiful product like that. So I speed this up because I go on for ages doing this. So pretty much everything that's really intricate like that will usually overspill, and I'm never surprised. But I've learnt my lesson many of times. I've lost lots of components not doing brush latex or getting lazy or getting complacent. So just stick to the process. Okay, one of the other things I forgot to tell you about too when you're actually resin coating, because I always forget these things. If you get air bubbles in the resin while you're resin coating or with your pipettes, use a flame, a little torch or a little butane flame or a little creme brulee flame to gently go over and pop the bubbles. I'm going to talk more about this in depth. I need more on this. We need more. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully you've learned something. See you in the next one.